Peace be upon you, God willing. Today we're going to talk about a handful of verses and in regards to the Quran. And the verse I wanted to bring up was in chapter 59, verse 21. The header reads, "Greatness of the Quran." And it says, "If we revealed this Quran to a mountain, you would see it trembling, crumbling out of reverence for God. We cite these examples for the people that they may reflect." It's pretty profound. I mean, we take it lightly because we see the Quran, published in books, and we don't think much of it as far as the heaviness of the message, right? What the implications are, and it's something that it takes time to really soak in, assuming that God is open our hearts to the message. Otherwise, if your heart isn't opened up to the message, you're going to be blocked out from understanding it. But assuming that that's the case, you realize that basically every matter of our salvation, our purpose here, why we're here, where we go from here, what's the purpose of life, is all entailed in the Quran. And there's a lot of underlying responsibility that falls on the human being. One of the popular aspects you're seeing in a lot of mass media is kind of this, we're not responsible. We're dictated by our genes, our surroundings. We don't have this responsibility. And God is telling us otherwise, that no, you are responsible. He's given us the hearing, the eyesight, and the brain, and we're responsible for using them to make the right choices. And it's easy, in essence, to just be passive, to say we don't have responsibility, or come up with scenarios in the sense of saying like, if you just believe in this idol when you die, or you say these magic words when you die, all your sins are forgiven and you make it to paradise. Or other people who say there is nothing after this world. We live, we die, and that's it. And God is telling us otherwise, that no, this world is very serious, that we're in this world to determine what our eternity holds for us. The decisions we make in this life are ultimately going to affect us for all of eternity. And it's not to be taken lightly. And that's why I believe that God is emphasizing just how heavy of a message this is. When you tell someone that, look, every choice you make, ultimately, whatever convictions you come to in this life, it's going to have an effect on you for the rest of eternity. It's a very profound and heavy message. And what's awesome about the Quran is that, it's 114 chapters. It's not a short book, but it's not, volumes and volumes and volumes of text. Because if God wanted to, God could have went into all kinds of details, right? Explaining everything in just, the most detailed format. But he gave us a book, 114 chapters, 2,698 verses. No, sorry, 6,000 plus verses. 2,698 is the number of times the word Allah is mentioned in the Quran. 6,000, I think, 234 verses in the Quran. And every matter of our, purpose of our existence for salvation is covered in these verses. And in chapter 31, verse 27, it reads, "These are all the words we need." It says, "If all the trees on earth were made into pens, and all the ocean supplied the ink augmented by 7 more oceans, the words of God would not run out. God is almighty, most wise." And in chapter 18, verse 109, the header reads, "The Quran, everything we need." And the verse reads, "Say, if the ocean were ink for the words of my Lord, the ocean would run out before the words of my Lord run out, even if we doubled the ink supply." Now you think of this, that God is not short on words. If God wanted to, he could have provided us with volumes and volumes of text specifying every, minutia of our, detail to live a perfect life. But God made it easy on us. He gave us a book, a relatively, relative to what it could be, a condensed book with all the matters that we could possibly have covered in this book, this textbook that we have for life. And it's really, you think about it, anything, any moral decision, any question that you have as far as salvation, it's covered in these 6,000 plus verses, 114 chapters. And oftentimes when someone hears that, they immediately, they come up with questions. Oh, what about X? What about Y? Why isn't this covered in the Quran? And God actually addresses this In chapter 5, verse 101, it reads, O you who believe, do not ask about matters which, if revealed to you prematurely, would hurt you. If you ask about them in the light of the Quran, they will become obvious to you. God has deliberately overlooked them. God is forgiver clement. The takeaway I have from this verse is saying that, look, God didn't need to go and specify every single form of sin, right? God can, in essence, blanket that with certain statements, like in essence, oppression is wrong. Aggression against someone who's not aggressing it towards you is wrong. Any kind of belligerence, violence, these are sinful. Lying, cheating, hoarding. God basically covers the fundamentals, and we can apply that to any specific instance without having to go to great detail. And having that kind of that foundation, right? It's awesome in the sense that God gives us, allows us to be the decision maker in how much of an effect we want to put into these aspects. So, for instance, there's certain things in our religion that are rigid. How we do our contact prayers. How many times do we do our contact prayers a day? How many steps are there in ablution? These are rigid. There isn't flexibility there. But then in other regards, God is very, gives us the guidelines and leaves it up to us. So, God gives us some examples of commemoration, but it's ultimately up to us how we choose to commemorate God. Giving to charity. God specifies 2.5% for zakat, the obligatory charity. But other than that, he basically gives us guidelines. Give the excess. Give from the things you love. And it's awesome in that sense because it allows us to see what our true nature is. How righteous are we? How unrighteous are we? And it allows it to become clear because God sets these kind of like guidelines, the foundation, the fundamentals, and allows us to have these choices to determine, how much do we really believe in what God is telling us. And a profound example of this is in chapter 2. You think of chapter 2 is the longest chapter in the entire Quran, and it covers, all kinds of details of financial transactions, divorce, oppression, all fasting, all the major principles of the religion are covered in there. But the name of the chapter is called Al-Baqarah, or the heifer. And you have to think of this. There's a lesson to be learned that God chose this as the name of the second chapter, which is the longest chapter in the Quran. And what's so profound about this? And if we read the example, it's in chapter 2, verse 67 through 71. It reads, the heifer. Moses said to his people, God commands you to sacrifice a heifer. They said, are you mocking us? He said, God forbid that I should behave like the ignorant ones. They said, call upon your Lord to show us which one. He says that she is a heifer that is neither too old nor too young, of an intermediate age. Now carry what you are commanded to do. They said, call upon your Lord to show us her color. He says that she is a yellow heifer, bright colored, pleases the beholders. They said, call upon your Lord to show us which one. The heifers look alike to us, and God willing we will be guided. He says that she is a heifer that was neither humiliated in plowing the land or watering the crops, free from any blemish. They said, now you have brought the truth. They finally sacrificed her after this lengthy reluctance. And the footnote we read, although the surah contains important laws and commandments, including the contact fasting, Hajj pilgrimage, and the laws of marriage, divorce, etc., the name given to this surah is the heifer. This reflects the crucial importance of submission to God and immediate unwavering obedience to our Creator. Such submission proves our belief in God's omnipotence and absolute authority. And it also cites the Bible, Book of Numbers, chapter 19. And you think of this, God gave the children of Israel a very direct commandment, sacrifice a heifer. But as opposed to just following through, right, trying to do it the best they can, obviously picking the best heifer that they can find and, following through these commandments, they were bombarding Moses with questions, asking for specifics, right? What color? Which one? How old? All these kind of like these questions they came up, and it showed their reluctance. Even when Moses first said, "Hey, God commands you to sacrifice a heifer," they said, "Are you mocking us?" Right? They didn't believe it. And we need to be to the point when God says, for instance, give to charity, right? We do our utmost to fulfill that commandment, right? God tells us to be reverent during our contact prayers. We try our utmost to be reverent. Now, we can think to ourselves and kind of like, discuss how we could potentially be more reverent. Maybe there's something we've overlooked or, ways of giving to charity, this and that. But to think that, oh, God didn't specify, God left it out, is kind of absurd. And the thing is, we have to be to the point where we trust in God. When God tells us that the Quran is fully detailed, it's complete, it has examples of everything that we need to be concerned about in regards to our salvation, that we have to trust in God. And when God gives us a commandment, we carry it through, and we do it to the best of our ability. And in chapter 11, verse 12, it reads, God's revelation is heavy. It says, you may wish to disregard some of that which is revealed to you, and you may be annoyed by it. Also they may say, how come no treasure comes down to him from an angel? You're only a warner, God controls all things. And what I find profound in this verse is that God realizes, us as humans, we let's put it this way: certain skill sets or characteristics are flawed in us, and we're here in this world to improve them. And one of them is that God gives us a commandment, and as opposed to being joyful and happy that God is giving us this direction, we have a tendency of saying being annoyed. And one of the examples is people, they want to get all the blessings that God has promised to them, but when they hear like, oh, you got to pray 5 times a day, and I'm talking about the contact prayer, or you have to say, God willing, before you do anything in the future, or you have to do the 4 steps of ablution before you pray, that they're annoyed by this, and they think that the religion is difficult. And what they don't realize is like, look, God is doing this for our own benefit. God doesn't give us these commandments lightly. There's a great, great reward, both in this world and in the hereafter, for our bodies and our soul by carrying out these commandments. And look at the amount of patience and forgiveness that God has. That God acknowledges that we're in this world, we're trying to kill our egos, and He acknowledges that some of us might be annoyed. And as opposed to writing us off, He encourages us to basically come around. And it's a real blessing. You think about how gracious, how merciful God is towards us. That we defied Him, we came into this world. Most of us are unappreciative, bitter, unhappy, resentful, and yet He gives us so much. He gives us the hearing, the eyesight, the brains, all the possessions, the families, the air you breathe, the house you live in, the bed you sleep in. He gives us all this, and to see whether we're appreciative or unappreciative. And God willing, we're going to end there. But think about that. Just next time you're reading the Quran, think about just how heavy of a message this is, and take it in stride. Right? God understands that it's going to be difficult, but God helps us along the way, makes it easy. And if we trust in Him, God always fulfills His promise, and we'll never have anything to worry about or anything to fear. As always, if you got any comments or questions, feel free to email us at QuranTalk@gmail.com. Until next time, peace and God bless.